Yeah. So we've gone up to the point, Rob, where you've been publishing the magazine. Lots of our readers will know about it because we've had a good sort of working relationship. We tell each other's readers about what we're up to and so on.
That's right. Yes, I'm very
And
grateful for that, by the way. It's
so
always been
this is
fun.
great. So you're like, okay, I'm a freelance person, and you wrote pieces for us saying, look, I mean, I can live on £8,000 a year. I don't really need that much. So there's a kind of nice Diogenes type element to this whole thing. What do you actually need? I can live in a barrel. Um, and at some point, I think you met your future wife, and who is Canadian, and then moved to Canada, where you continued your flaneur life.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. So, yeah, so what happened? So it was, I had my blog. I had a sort of humorously intended blog, which she recently described as quite funny to someone in an interview, which I was happy about. And she used to leave comments, and I used to think, oh, this person's quite funny. And then it turned out she was an illustrator. So I asked her to do some illustrations for the magazine, and I've still got all of our original emails. They're all very
Oh,
professional and very, dry. It's just, oh, I wonder if
yeah.
you'd mind sending us some work. So that's quite sweet. So we met, and she came to visit Scotland for some other reason. We hit it off, and then I fell hopelessly in love. But then I realized because I am freelance, I'm not stuck here. I don't have to be in Glasgow. I mean, I was living in Glasgow by choice. I love it here. But I also realized, well, I'm a mobile human being now. I could just go there. So that's what I did. And there was a little bit of logistical stress to actually move there, but we figured it out quite quickly. And before we knew it, 4 winters had passed, and I'm still refusing to speak French, living in Montreal, flaneuring around, eating wonderful food, drinking their strong beer, writing my books. I think I wrote Escape Everything. I wrote most of that in Canada. Um, and yeah, it was just a wonderful, wonderful life. And I was recommended to everybody. I think there's a chapter of that book actually called The Montreal Year, where I describe the life and say, look, you don't have to be here for this, but you could replicate this sort of schedule based around this Montreal year. This is one of
Yeah.
my findings.
Yeah, I
So
remember your
yeah.
pieces about it, and so that does sound like a really good life he's got going for him in Canada.
It
And
was low cost is the thing. It was extremely
yeah,
frugal.
right,
There's a strong culture there of people not really caring about serious work. So everybody I met this won't be true of everybody, but everybody I met was either a short order cook or a bicycle courier or a yoga teacher or something. They were all doing fun things part time. So
yeah.
there's just this very laissez-faire attitude in Montreal. So I love that about it. So perfect place for an idler. I do recommend it to any other idlers out there. But it all came screeching to a halt.
Yes, and it was, as you say in this new book, kind of slightly embarrassing because you've been telling everyone, I don't need a job. No one needs a job. Be free, man. Just get out of it, you squares. And it's like, oh, it's all right for you, Rob, isn't it, with your flaneur lifestyle? Um, but then you suddenly found that you were actually forced, really against your will, not only to get a job, but you ended up in the same job that you rejected, which you left many years ago, which you really hated.
Yeah, it was very humiliating, but luckily that's quite good for a comedian. It reminds me of the idea of somebody standing up and making a fuss and then storming out, but they've gone into the broom closet. It's the exact same thing. That's basically what I'd done. So yeah, so it was. We decided we moved back to Glasgow, but in doing so, it was right in the middle of the sort of immigration hostile environment. It all changed in 2012. And then Theresa May got elected and really doubled down on it. And it was just a really bad time to move to the
Can
UK.
you just explain that?
So
Can you just explain the hostile environment? Because you talk about that in the book, and I didn't remember that. So just for anyone else who doesn't remember, because it's an amazing phrase which you conjure with effectively later as well, the hostile environment. So you're actually
mm,
saying that there was a deliberate attempt on the part of the UK government when when Theresa May was Prime Minister, or when she was Home Secretary. Uh,
yeah, well, it was when she was Home Secretary. So
yeah.
it was originally David Cameron had put in a ludicrous target for the number of people who were allowed into the UK, and it was something like 100. It's bad to put it on the record, but I think it was 100,000, maybe 150,000. It was something ludicrously small anyway. But Theresa May, as Home Secretary, just went for this with insane zeal, which to this day, I'm not sure if that was ideological or if it was just purely managerial. If she just saw a target and a number and just sort of went for it, it really could be
Yeah.
that.
So with the hope that she wouldn't be sacked if she
Yeah,
got
that's
caught.
right.
Yeah.
So the idea was it was encouraging people to self-deport. So rather than the traditional model of sending someone with black gloves round to your house to knock on the door and cart you away, what they did is they just make your life completely bureaucratically unbearable, so you'll just leave. They
Yeah.
would do things like compound, confiscate people's bank accounts and stuff. And that was supposed to be for illegal immigrants, but they had something like a 10% margin of error. So they were just essentially bullying anybody who was not native to here. And so, as white English speakers, we did not get the worst of this. The worst of this were people who had to live in neighborhoods with vans patrolling around with lights on the side saying, if you're here illegally, go home, or and encouraging people to shop their neighbors in and things like that. Really, really grim stuff. So we sort of encountered a lot of this. So we'd be trying to get, a bank account for my wife or something. We'd be in line with refugees and we'd sort of hear their stories about how bad it all was. But even for us, it was very difficult. It was really hard to actually get set up here and expensive because it used to be free. When I went there, when I went to Canada and when we met, it was, you could basically just go. I mean, there was things to apply for, but there was nothing. What they introduced was something called the financial requirement or the minimum financial requirement, which when we came back to Britain, it was something like, I think it was 16,500, maybe 18,500. But whatever it was, I earned nothing remotely like that as a freelance writer and comedian and whatnot. In fact, I've made a big deal, as you said, about how I can live on 8.5 grand or something. So this was just suddenly impossible. And I felt a bit like Winnie the Pooh down the rabbit hole, how he'd gone in small and expanded while he was in there, and now he couldn't get back home. That was basically the situation. So it was pretty grim stuff. And as far as I know, it's getting worse. So we're safe now. We've sort of figured it all out. But I think the financial threshold is much bigger now and all this. So
So it was the financial thing that meant that you had to get a job in order to prove that you had sufficient income for you to be allowed to live back in Glasgow where you had lived before.
that's right, because I was a spousal sponsor, and to qualify for that, you have to have a certain income legally arrived at in Glasgow, well, in Britain. So I just had to find work. And I thought, oh, I could get one of those bullshit jobs that I'm always complaining about. It'll be really easy. I'll just put my feet up. But the main job that I seemed qualified for was the same job that I'd escaped 5, 6 years
5 years previously.
previously.
And
So
then
I
so
had to
but
go
this
and
amazing position of going back into the same job with some of the same people.
some of the same people, yeah. So it was actually a different office, which made me appreciate how easy we had it before, actually, because it was a really nice. It was in a very leafy neighborhood before. It was in a nice sort of old-fashioned building right on the shoulder of Kelvin Grove Park, and you'd look out the window, and all you'd see is trees and kids on the climbing frame and stuff. So actually, in the old days, it was really nice. And I used to think, God, this is what I hated, but it was really nice back then. So where we were now was this huge place that I call Concrete Island because it was you had to cross two motorways to get to it. It was really phenomenally unpedestrianized, and I would just sit there all day looking at the window, watching the cars just zoom past on this overpass thing. And it was really phenomenally dispiriting. But then, yeah, I actually did work with some of the same people that I'd worked with the first time around. And they're people I remembered fondly. And I even used to spare a thought for them when I was sunbathing in Montreal or whatever. I'd think, oh, I wonder what Derek's up to now. And I'd know what he's doing because I could remember the schedule. I think, oh, he's in the staff meeting, of course, 10 o'clock on Monday morning. That's what he's doing. So, yeah, I didn't forget any of these people. I liked them very much. But I was kind of shocked by how they'd physically changed. I think I looked basically the same as when I'd left, but they'd sort of aged horribly. They got sort of stoops from sort of being in the computer all the time, and some of them. There was a poor girl I sat next to. She was. I remember her being really attractive, very sort of free-spirited when I worked there originally, and when I came back, she was sort of flinchy and shivering, as if she was constantly shell-shocked or something. Like she was under constant attack from just oi, what are you doing? You shouldn't be on Facebook, that sort of culture. So I actually saw in real life sort of the effects of actually what 6 years of office drudgery can actually do to you because I stepped out and came
In
back.
a
But
sense,
it's very sad.
all the ideas that you had in your first book were proved, really. You know, you didn't think, oh, maybe it is quite nice to have this kind of regular income. So then your next task is, well, how can I kind of salvage some humanity out of this?